These potatoes were harvested 6 months ago. No root cellar, no fridge, no electricity, just a wooden box, some sand, and one rule that almost everyone breaks in the first week. If you get that rule wrong, you lose your entire harvest to rot before winter even starts. But get it right, and you'll have firm, fresh potatoes into spring. Here is the setup. The average American throws away almost 40 pounds of produce every year. Potatoes are often the first to go. You pull one out in January. It's wrinkled and shooting green sprouts. It's wasteful. It's frustrating. And it's avoidable. This method predates refrigerators, costs almost nothing, and can keep potatoes firm for 6 months or more. But the secret isn't the sand or the box. It's what you do in the first week. Get that wrong, and you lose everything. Most people make the mistake before they even finish harvesting. They pull the potatoes from the ground, hose off the dirt, and stack them in a bag in the garage. 2 weeks later, the entire pile is mush, and they blame the storage method. But the failure happened in the first 7 days, before the potatoes ever touched a box or a single grain of sand. Here is what you need to understand about a potato. It's not a rock, it's a living tuber. When you dig it up, the skin is paper thin and covered in microscopic wounds. Underneath that skin, the potato is trying to heal itself. It needs oxygen, it needs darkness, and it needs humidity so high it would ruin the drywall in your living room. Specifically, it needs about 95% humidity and a temperature between 43 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. For centuries, families solved this with a root cellar. Dig a hole underground, line it with stone, and the earth does the work. Temperature stays steady. Humidity stays sky high, and potatoes last from October, clear through April. But if you do not have a root cellar, you have been told to throw your potatoes in the refrigerator, and that advice is wrong. Not just wrong, destructive. At refrigerator temperatures, the starches in a raw potato convert to sugar. Your potatoes turn sweet, then gritty, then they turn dark when you cook them. The fridge is a slow kitchen disaster. The sand method works. A wooden box, dry builders, sand, layering the potatoes so they never touch. That mimics the cool, dark humidity of a root cellar almost anywhere. But the box cannot save a potato that was ruined before it went in. The one rule most people break in the first week is this: you never wash a potato before storage. Not a drop of water. You brush off loose soil and you leave the rest. That thin layer of dirt is a protective skin, while the real skin toughens up from paper to leather. This process is called curing. And the difference between a cured potato and a freshly dug potato is the difference between a green recruit and a battle-hardened soldier. 12 days. That is the sweet spot. Spread them in a single layer in the dark at around 55 degrees. Let the nicks heal over and the moisture stabilize inside. Do this, and you have potatoes that can last 6 months. Skip it, and you will smell the rot before you see it. But even if you cure them perfectly, there is a single household item that can destroy your entire harvest in a matter of days, and you probably keep it right next to where you store your potatoes. It's your fruit bowl. That bowl of apples and bananas sitting on the counter, or worse, in the pantry next to your potato bin, is secretly gassing your harvest into an early grave. The culprit is ethylene, a natural plant hormone that ripening fruit releases into the air. Apples, bananas, onions, tomatoes, they all pump out ethylene gas like a slow, invisible poison. When potatoes breathe it in, the signal is unmistakable. Wake up. It's time to grow. And within days, firm winter storage potatoes push out pale white sprouts, turning soft and wrinkled as they burn through their stored energy. Now here is where it gets strange. There is a counterintuitive trick that homesteaders have argued about for decades. You can actually use a single apple to stop your potatoes from sprouting. I know that sounds like a contradiction. I just told you that ethylene triggers sprouting, and in large concentrations from a bowl of mixed fruit, it absolutely does. But a single fresh apple, placed directly among your potatoes in a closed container, releases a low, steady dose of ethylene, and at that low dose, something different happens. The gas suppresses sprout growth instead of accelerating it. It's a tightrope. Too much apple, you get rot. Too little, no effect. But get it exactly right. 1 apple per crate, and the potatoes remain dormant longer. This is not folk wisdom. It's documented agricultural science. The Russians studied this extensively during the Cold War while trying to solve long-term food storage without electricity. But you cannot rely on trick apples alone. The real foundation of 6-month storage is the environment. Temperature is non-negotiable. 43 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That narrow band. Any warmer and the potatoes wake up. Any colder and the starches convert to sugar. You need to find the coldest corner of your house that never freezes. An unheated basement stairs. An interior closet against an outside wall. A garage that stays just above freezing. If you live in a warm climate and you cannot hit that temperature range, you are going to lose a month or 2 off the back end. But you can compensate by choosing the right variety, which I will get to in a moment. Humidity is the second leg of the stool. You need it high, around 95%. That's nearly rainforest level. The reason most potatoes shrivel in modern homes is that forced air heating pulls humidity down to desert levels. The potato loses water through its skin, and you end up with a soft, leathery prune instead of a firm spud. The sand in a wooden crate solves this. Dry sand absorbs moisture from the potatoes, then releases it back slowly, creating a sealed microclimate that stays humid without making everything wet. You do not use wet sand. You use bone-dry builder's sand, and the potatoes themselves provide the moisture. It's a self-regulating system. But the variety you store matters just as much as the box you build. Thin-skinned varieties, like Yukon Gold, are sprouters. They were not bred for storage. They want to grow. You will be lucky to get 3 months out of a Yukon Gold before the eyes start pushing through. Thick-skinned Russets are the endurance athletes. They were developed specifically for winter storage. Their skin is tough, and their dormancy period is long. In the same crate, under the same conditions, a russet will easily outlast a gold potato by 3 or 4 months. Red potatoes fall somewhere in between. So the simple rule is this: eat your thin-skinned potatoes first, golds in the fall, then reds through the holidays, then russets all the way into spring. Now you have the science, the temperature, the humidity, the variety. But there is still a hidden ticking clock inside every single potato you bring in from the garden. And ignoring this clock is the reason entire crates rot from the inside out, while the outside looks perfect until the moment you open the lid. That clock is respiration. A potato is not inert. It breathes. Even in storage, a pile of potatoes consumes oxygen and releases carbon dioxide and heat. In a sealed container, that heat builds up from the inside. You cannot feel it from the outside of the crate, but deep in the center, the temperature can climb 10 degrees above the surrounding air. And at 60 degrees, the potato's dormancy breaks. It starts preparing to grow. Cells divide, the flesh softens, and the warmth creates a perfect breeding ground for bacteria that were already living on the skin, waiting for a wound that never healed properly. The first sign is a smell, not the earthy smell of fresh potatoes, something sharper, almost sweet, but wrong. When you lift the lid of the crate, the potatoes on top look fine, smooth skin, firm to the touch. But you dig down a layer, and your fingers find a wet spot. One potato has collapsed into a sunken sack of fluid, and that fluid is spreading to its neighbors. This is bacterial soft rot. Once it starts in a closed crate, it travels fast, and the deeper you stacked the potatoes, the worse the center becomes. That is why the old-timers never piled potatoes more than 2 layers deep in sand. The weight alone bruises the bottom potatoes, and the lack of airflow turns bruises into rot. But here is the thing. Even if you solve the rot, even if your ventilation is perfect, and your temperature never wavers, there is a second threat that operates in total silence. Light. A single crack of light hitting the side of your storage crate for an hour a day is enough to trigger a chemical reaction inside the potato that cannot be reversed. The potato produces chlorophyll. That is the green tint you see on potatoes left out on the counter. Chlorophyll in itself is harmless, but the same light exposure also triggers the production of solanine, a glycoalkaloid toxin. Solanine is the potato's natural defense against insects and animals. It tastes bitter, and in high enough concentrations, it causes nausea, headaches, and neurological problems. Cooking does not break it down, so when you see a potato with a green tinge, that green is a warning sign. The solanine is concentrated in the skin and the layer just beneath it. You can peel away the green parts and still eat the white flesh. But if the potato tastes bitter, you stop eating. The sand in the crate serves a double purpose. It blocks light completely. Every potato is buried in darkness, even when you open the lid. But wait, this gets bigger, because there is a third mistake that even people who nail the temperature, the humidity, the darkness, and the ventilation still get wrong. They store potatoes and onions together. It makes sense on paper. Both crops come out of the garden at the same time. Both like cool, dark conditions. So people build one storage area and pile the onion bags next to the potato crates. This is a disaster. Onions emit high levels of ethylene and moisture, and they absorb odors. Potatoes and onions in the same room will destroy each other. The onions make the potatoes sprout. The potatoes make the onions rot. The two crops antagonize each other at a chemical level and need to be stored in separate spaces entirely. This is the moment where most home storage systems fail, not because the method does not work, but because the gardener tried to simplify the storage into one universal setup. A root cellar has separate bins, separate humidity zones, and constant air exchange. When you replicate that above ground with a wooden crate and sand, you are building a miniature root cellar for one crop. You cannot mix crops any more than you can mix ammonia and bleach under the kitchen sink. The chemistry punishes shortcuts. And yet, if you follow every rule, the sand crate method works so well that you will forget the potatoes are even in the house until you need them in February. That is the payoff. But there is one last piece to this. The moment you pull a potato out of storage, you have to make a choice that decides whether all that effort was worth it. And most people get this last step wrong, too. The mistake happens at the kitchen sink. You dig a potato out of the sand, brush off the grit, and drop it straight into the pot. That is the wrong move. After months in cold storage, The potato's internal chemistry has shifted. Some starch has converted to reducing sugars. It is not as extreme as the sweet disaster you get from a refrigerator, but it is enough that if you cook the potato immediately, it will brown unevenly and carry a faint sweetness that tastes off. The fix is simple. After pulling your potatoes from storage, let them sit at room temperature on the counter for 3 to 5 days before you cook them. This process is called reconditioning. The sugars slowly convert back to starch, the flavor balances out, and the flesh firms up. You just waited 6 months. You can wait 3 more days. Now you open the crate and everything is exactly as you hoped. The potatoes are firm, the skins are unbroken, and there is no smell of rot. This is the payoff that justifies every rule you followed. But before you start cooking, there is one more inspection to make. In storage, you never saw the potatoes because they were buried in darkness. Now, under the kitchen light, check for any green patches. If a potato sat too close to the surface and caught a sliver of light for too long, you will see a green tint. That is chlorophyll, and it means solanine is present. Peel away every bit of green. If the potato tastes bitter when you sample a raw slice, discard the whole thing. Solanine poisoning is rare, but it is not worth testing your luck. Here is something surprising that experienced storage growers notice after a few seasons. Potatoes that have been properly cured, stored in sand, and kept at steady, cool temperatures actually improve in texture over time. The skin thickens just enough to seal in moisture, so the flesh stays creamy when cooked. The starches stabilize. By midwinter, a russet pulled from a sand crate tastes better than any bagged potato you have ever bought at a grocery store. There is a reason. Commercial potatoes are often stored in giant climate-controlled warehouses where they are sprayed with sprout inhibitors like chlorophyll. These chemicals extend shelf life, but they mute flavor. Your sand crate contains only sand, wood, and a perfect microclimate. Nothing else. And one more thing. This whole setup, the wooden box, the builder's sand, the careful layering, works for more than potatoes. Carrots, turnips, beets, and parsnips all thrive in the same system. Root vegetables evolved to survive underground through winter. The sand crate is just giving them back their natural habitat. So if you are going to build one box, build two. Keep the root vegetables separate from the potatoes because of that humidity conflict. But the principles are identical. By the time the first frost hits, you could have 6 months of fresh produce sitting quietly in the corner of your garage. Now you have the whole picture. You know the one rule most people break in the first week. You know why the fruit bowl is a threat, why the onion bin is an enemy, and why the refrigerator is a lie. You know that a raw potato is alive, breathing, healing, and waiting to be treated correctly. And you know that the oldest storage method in human history still works, because you do not need electricity to preserve food. You need a box, some sand, and a little patience. The thing is, almost nobody talks about this anymore. We got refrigerators and grocery stores, and we forgot that a wooden crate and some sand can outlast most modern appliances. The Amish never forgot. Homesteaders before us never forgot. But somewhere between industrial farming and fluorescent-lit produce aisles, we lost the confidence to store our own food. This method is not complicated. It is just quiet and slow, and demands that you pay attention to the living thing in your hands. How many other skills like this have we traded for convenience without realizing what we gave up? That is the question I keep coming back to. If this resonated with you, if you are the kind of person who wants to know how things actually work, hit subscribe. I put a special offer together for this community through the link in the first pinned comment below. The knowledge that kept families fed through winter for centuries is still here. You just have to reach back for it.